This meeting of the Starkville Board of Aldermen will now come to order.
Please rise for the saying of the Pledge of Allegiance to be followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, you have before you a copy of the modified written agenda. Are there any proposed revisions to the agenda as written? Any proposed revisions to the agenda as written? Any proposed revisions? If there are no proposed revisions, a motion to adopt the agenda as written is in order.
I've got a few. Unless the city attorney has any recommendations on the minutes, I'll place those on consent.
Chris, I got you. I got them changed.
Okay, I had 3 minor corrections, just typo type things that I forwarded to the city clerk.
So those have been written?
Those have been incorporated, I believe.
They're not your e-packet, but we got them though.
Okay. So I'd like to place the minutes as modified on the consent agenda.
Proposed revision from Alderman Dumas is to place the approval of the minutes from the November 20th, 2012 recess meeting of the Board of Aldermen as modified by the city attorney on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Do I hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda.
Under the report from Audit and Budget Committee, I'd like to place item 2 on consent.
All right, the proposed revision of Alderman Dumas is to place item 2 under the report from the Budget and Audit Committee, a unanimous recommendation from the committee to make a budget amendment to recognize the loss of grant funding to the EMSOF service and suspend payment to the hospital for ambulance service to reallocate those funds to the contingency fund on the consent agenda. And I would ask that this not be placed on the consent agenda because I do have some comments I'd like to make about the matter.
Mr. Mayor, may I be recognized?
You may.
I think only an alderman can keep it off consent, so
That's correct.
you're not precluded from making your comments.
That's right. In the event that it goes on consent, I will make my comments now.
I want to remove from consent.
All right. So that matter will remain on the open agenda. We have further proposed revisions.
Mayor.
Alderman Corey.
On item E, the appointments to the Airport Regional Solid Waste Authority and Library Board, did we have any other applicants other than the 3 at our table?
No, I believe those are the only 3. Ms. Sproul?
Mr. Richardson's application was actually in the e-packet.
Oh, okay, so we have 2 for one of them?
Yeah, we did. And I had mentioned in the packet that Mr. Adams had volunteered to serve on the solid waste authority. So there were 2, and then you have 3 that came in after the packet was out.
Oh, okay, well then I'll hold off on that item.
Do we have any further proposed revisions?
Under personnel, I'd like to add item 1 to consent.
Proposed revision from Alderman Dumas is to add item 11H1, the authorization to advertise for a maintenance technician for the wastewater division of the Public Services Department to the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been added to the consent agenda.
And then finally, under Finance and Administration, item 3 to consent.
Proposed revision from Alderman Dumas is to place item 11E3, the approval of the merchant services contract with Transfirst for the city of Starkville as presented on the consent agenda.
Mayor, can I be heard on that issue?
You may.
There's a spot on that contract for a guarantor signature on behalf of the city of Starkville. I've advised city staff previously to strike that provision and not sign it. And you may have a later information than I have on that.
The way our contract is currently structured, this is something going back to our last depository bid. Cadence actually served in that capacity for us. And like I said, what this is about is, they were with a company called Elevon, and they have changed to this, but they pay all of our fees and serve as our guarantor on the product. So basically, I'm glad to strike that because they serve in that capacity.
And my position is, so long as no city employee signs the guarantor
That's
provision or the mayor signs it, I'm fine.
Okay.
So you would recommend a change to the document?
If they will let you strike that guarantor box, do so. But if Cadence is the guarantor and they want to sign, that's fine too, whatever they want to do.
Okay, so you're comfortable with the document as is being approved?
Correct.
Okay. So Alderman Dumas, that's your proposed revision to place that matter as presented on the consent agenda? It is. Do I hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda. Do we have any further proposed revisions, Alderman Dumas?
I do not.
Any further proposed revisions from the members of the board? Any further proposed revisions from the members of the board? Seeing none, a motion to approve the agenda as revised is in order.
So moved.
Motion has been made by Alderman Corey to approve the agenda as revised. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Dumas. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. You now have before you the approval of the consent agenda. Is there any objection to the approval of the consent agenda as written? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, the consent agenda as written has been approved. And I have one announcement tonight. That is the introduction of our two newest employees. First, I would like to introduce Tyler Hart. It is my pleasure to welcome Tyler Hart to the city of Starkville. Tyler was recently hired as a maintenance worker for the water department. He is originally from Starkville and a graduate of Starkville High School. He attended Rusk College as well as Hines Community College. Before joining the city of Starkville, Tyler was a garden center sales associate for Walmart. Tyler is the son of Lisa Hart, who is a cashier for Starkville Electric. He has two brothers, Alex and Jonathan, and sister Brent. He and his family attend Griffin United Methodist Church. In his spare time, Tyler enjoys sports and exercise. Please join me in welcoming Tyler. I'd now like to introduce Joel Murphy. Joel is a new apprentice lineman at Starkville Electric. He is originally from Baden, Mississippi. He completed his GED and attended Holmes Community College, where he received his certificate in electrical lineman training. Previously, Joel worked at MDR Construction out of Columbia, Mississippi. He plans to relocate to Starkville upon acceptance for this position. Joel is married, and he and his wife, Corey, are the proud parents of two sons, Dalton and Cade, and are expecting another boy in May. Joel and his family are members of Baden Baptist Church. In his spare time, Joel enjoys hunting, fishing, playing with his dog, Deuce, as well as spending time with his family. Please join me in welcoming Joel. That concludes my comments for this evening. We have one scheduled comment from the members of the board, and that is the introduction of our Employee of the Month by Alderman Parker.
Corey.
Or Alderman Corey, excuse me.
I have the honor of acknowledging the Employee of the Month this month, which is Vicki Lowry. The City of Starkville is proud to recognize Vicki as our Employee of the Month for January of 2013. Vicki, please stand.
She's coming over.
Vicki was hired as the receptionist for City Hall in November of 2005 and now serves as the in-house code enforcement officer. Since Vicki was hired, she has become a valuable asset to the City of Starkville. Her willingness to go the extra mile is very much appreciated. Along with her duties as code enforcement officer, Vicki helps out all over City Hall when departments are shorthanded. She fills in for the Community Development Department when someone is out, as well as the Mayor's office. She also has been known to man the switchboard. When Vicki is asked to do something outside her normal job description, she does it with a smile and without complaint. She can be commended for the extra effort she gives to the City of Starkville. Her can-do attitude is a positive influence for everyone in City Hall. The City of Starkville is proud to recognize Vicki Lowry as Employee of the Month for January of 2013.
Are there any further comments from the members of the board? Do we have any further comments from the members of the board this evening? Any further comments from the members of the board? Seeing none, we'll move to citizen comments. At this time, any citizen wishing to make comments this evening may do so by coming forward, introducing yourself, and you'll be recognized to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes.
Happy New Year to everyone. My name is Alderman Ward 7. Would like to recognize Vice Mayor Sid Trump and Alderman Vaughn.
Thank you.
Citizens, we still would like, with all the trauma that is happening, we still would like to open up with prayer. When I was coming up, I had this illness I had been having ever since 6 years old, and I have to take Dilatin 100 every day to control my illness. On the other hand, Haldol that is prescribed for mental health, some people do not take it because of the side effects. Or they hear voices, and if they're arguing with the voices, do not interfere because those voices would have them to attack. We would like to make mention of the flower thing on 25 in front of Pine Trailer Park. It's beginning to be dangerous because of the fog, and people might not know that that concrete is in the middle of the road, and someone probably get run over, get killed because that they are not used to that being in the road. We'd like for you all to take notice of that. And we would also like for, if in any way possible, that the police department and someone from the military could have a slide to kind of show us what these guns and stuff that these kids are getting hold to look like, so we'll know what they look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Further citizen comment?
Good evening, Mayor and Board. Chris Taylor from Ward 7. I saw on the agenda where you all talking about a pay raise. Well, before you consider pay raise for yourself, think about those fellas that riding on the back of the garbage trucks or digging ditches out there that making less than $9 an hour. Think about that. Get them a raise first.
May I?
You may.
And I know we don't engage in
Yes, ma'am, that's
conversation, but I wanted to let you know that also on the agenda tonight, there is a Stennis Institute study about municipal salaries for the other employees.
Okay.
It doesn't look at the board and the mayor's salary in that survey. So that's why it's a sort of a two-step process, but we do intend to look at that.
Right, because I tell you, those fellas deserve it.
They work hard, I agree.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Further citizen comments? Do we have any further citizen comments? Any further citizen comments? Seeing none, we'll move to board business, and actually the first matter before you this evening in board business is the presentation of that staffing study by Dr. Jeff Markman.
Thank you, Mayor and Board, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
To you.
What I would like to do, and I know this has been in your packet since Friday, and it probably hasn't given you an abundance of time to go over all of the numbers and all of the data that we've included in it. So what I would like to do tonight is give a brief overview of not only the process of how we went about collecting the data and analyzing the data, but also point out some things that you might want to look at over the course of the next few weeks when you do consider perhaps adjusting any of the salaries that may need to be adjusted. And before I get started too, I'd also like to point out that, this is not really a scientific process. It's basically a process of collecting data from comparable cities, not only in the Southeast, not only in Mississippi, but also in the local labor market, just to determine how competitive your employees are. It doesn't address some of the issues that will have to be addressed in the coming days. Items such as how long a person has been in a position, the skill set a certain person may have, rewarding employees based on merit, a whole variety of issues that all should be included and perhaps added to the end of what we get through talking about tonight. But just to give you an overview, earlier this fall, and one of the reasons we waited until early this fall to go ahead and send out the actual survey document was because that was after most cities have adopted their new fiscal year budget for the year and set employee salaries for the upcoming fiscal year. So we wanted to make sure the data that we did collect from the comparables would be as up to date as possible. The first step in actually putting together the study was working with personnel, identifying all of the job titles and classifications that currently exist with Starkville, and then making sure we get a good synopsis of what the actual position does. In other words, we don't really want to compare titles to titles because an equipment operator here in Starkville may not be the same thing as an equipment operator in Tupelo or West Point. So after working in conjunction with Mr. Boyd, we were able to get a fairly detailed synopsis of the unique aspects, the unique major duties and responsibilities that a position would have in Starkville that might make it different from another city, just to make sure that we are comparing apples to apples. Now, it's not a perfect process because it's always limited to whatever the city clerk puts down on the survey. And sometimes the city clerk may see an actual job title, and it may say, municipal court clerk, and it may be in an entirely different position than what your court administrator does here. So there are going to be issues that you'll have to address after tonight. Once we put together the survey, it was then important to go ahead and identify who we're going to compare Starkville to. And this is going to be where the hard work comes in, not only on your part, but also whether it's in a committee meeting, a budget committee meeting, or working with personnel or with the chief administrative officer just to correct any discrepancies that may be there. But once we have the survey done, we identified comparables throughout the state of Mississippi. As you can see in the report, we also were able to gather data from Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. The number one thing we would look for in comparables is to make sure it's a city that's comparable in terms of population. Whatever the most recent census numbers were for Starkville, that's what we tried to go after with our comparables, with a plus or minus 10%, regardless of what state they were in. After that, though, we also would try to identify cities that had roughly the same departmental structure. In other words, they weren't outsourcing a lot of their public services, because most of y'all's public services are in-house. And you can see immediately when looking at your report that a lot of the electric department data is absent simply because a lot of cities actually don't have that department outside of a handful. So that will be another issue that we'll have to look at in terms of gaining more data in that arena. And then the other aspect of what we looked at was not only comparables throughout Mississippi and comparables throughout the southeastern United States, but also, and probably the most important part, was actually looking at all the cities within your local labor market. Everyone within a 60-mile radius of Starkville, regardless of how small it is, whether it's Mabin or whether it's West Point or whether it's even Tupelo, who's kind of on the verge of your local labor market. Anything that a person could technically and perhaps efficiently drive back and forth to work at. Some of these cities, of course, enforce ordinances where the employee must work within the city limit. Some may not. But some of these cities will allow a person, to advance within their city after a couple of years. Take a police officer, for example, after you've trained a police officer, spent 2 years getting them familiar with the city, how the city operates, and then losing them to West Point, or even, in this case, maybe even losing as a deputy sheriff to Oktibbeha County Sheriff's Department. So one of the things that you've got to concentrate on is making sure you're not losing them to any size organization within a working radius. Once we were able to identify all of the states, all of the cities, all of the counties that we looked at, you can see that we were able to identify 97 cities and counties that we looked at. Usually we have a response rate that is extremely minimal at first, because as you'll see from the annual municipal report that we put out every summer for the Municipal League, we survey cities and counties constantly, and they get, no offense, city clerks probably get tired of hearing from me when I send them a survey, because we survey so much. And I think at first we probably got about 8 responses. So after that, we were able to make a lot of follow-up calls, a lot of emails, a lot of extra letters, until we got the response rate up to around 30 cities that responded. Now the 30.
Can I stop you for a second? Of the 30, I know we're going to talk tonight a lot about the pay increase for the mayor and the board. Of those 30, was there any consideration to the type of government that they have, or is it just?
We tried our best to make sure that we did identify code charter, but as you'll see, there's going to be several examples that, especially in the other states, that are, and that's another issue, another flaw, as I would put it, in looking at the data, that some of these cities may be a city manager form of government. Even in Mississippi, there may be 2 or 3 that we did include data that you may want to consider as policymakers taking that out. But that's a good point. When we actually got back the 30, that doesn't mean that the actual survey had complete data. Some of the surveys that we got back may have only filled out data for 6 or 7 of the positions, because they didn't feel like the rest of the positions were comparable. Some of the cities may have filled out the entire survey, but when looking at it, you can spot certain things that are off, that they may have misinterpreted what we were asking for, and we would have to make follow-up calls to make sure they were actually matching the title and the synopsis before they gave us their data back. Now, it's probably not 100% accurate, again, like I went back about the city clerk. It's entirely up to the city clerk and how they evaluated that document to get us the data back on a lot of these positions. Now, if you look at the data results that we did receive, you'll see that a large majority of the positions fall below the average. When you're doing these types of studies, in my professional opinion, you'll usually look at either the average or the midpoint. I usually look at the midpoint. it helps with the skewing of the data primarily, because if you're looking at the average, it may include some cities in there that may have a higher general fund budget, like Mountain Brook, Alabama. So if you look at the average, that average is going to be a lot higher than the midpoint, because the midpoint will kind of help correct some of the cities that may not necessarily be that comparable. When you may have a Sturgis that responded, that obviously has an extremely small budget. If you look at the midpoint, it kind of helps correct some of that. But we included both the median and the average when we looked at it. But you'll see of the 54 salaries that we surveyed, 42 were actually less than the average. Now, your first reaction when you did get this in your packet Friday was probably shock. Some of you may not have been shocked. Some of it may have, made perfect sense to you and expected it. I'm not sure. But instead of going through each of the individual positions and how far they may be above or below the average or the median, what I like to do is give you my advice on how to work with the data that you've got in front of you over the next few weeks, so you can go ahead and start formulating a plan for your next fiscal year. Again, I've done these studies for a little over 15 years now, and almost every single time you're going to see studies that come back this way where cities are paying underneath the average and the median. It's not as shocking as it may look, especially if you look at the average. There's certain positions that I would really tackle first because they seem to be really, really below, especially some of the rank and file positions. But some of the things that I would look at that are helpful, number one, you may want to eliminate some of the cities that we looked at. Just because they're comparable in terms of population doesn't necessarily mean they're comparable in terms of what Starkville offers. You would love to just have a study that only encompasses college towns that are similar in terms of your budget, similar in terms of the departments you have, the number of employees you have, and how long your employees have actually served for the city. But you're just not going to find it, which is another issue. We're going to have to, over the coming weeks, have a lot of sit-downs and talk about it. Also, some cities prefer to only look at the bordering states to Mississippi. In other words, don't look at the entire Southeast, because some of these states like Florida and Texas obviously have larger cities, larger budgets. They're going to pay more. So one of the avenues you can look at is just comparing to the states that border Mississippi: Louisiana, Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama. Focus on those. Some cities prefer to just look at the comparables in Mississippi. With Starkville, you've got, I don't remember off the top of my head, but you've got close to 10 or so cities that you could look at in terms of population that you could get a pretty good idea of how you rank. And like I said earlier in the presentation, the local labor market is always so key with certain positions. It may not be so with your department heads that actually, for example, a police chief that could go and work for cities throughout the southeastern United States usually, because they advertise nationally for police chiefs just because of the qualifications for the position. But especially with some of the rank and file entry-level positions, it's really, really important to concentrate on what West Point's paying, Columbus is paying, Oktibbeha County may be paying for a similar position. And then, excuse me. Probably the most important factor, other than looking at what the other cities are paying, is looking at the internal equity part of this. Just because you see that a code enforcement officer is 74% below the average doesn't necessarily mean that it's truly 74% below the average. For example, your code enforcement officer here may have only worked here 6 months. The average code enforcement data from the other comparables may have an average of 14 and a half years. And that's why their averages are so much higher than what you're paying here. You may be paying at a grade 8, step 1 because of that, just because of the amount of time that the person has served in Starkville. So obviously you want to look at tenure. And finally, and I fully believe in this as well, a lot of cities will make the argument that department heads, regardless of your department, regardless of whether it's a police chief or someone running the court department, should not necessarily have the exact same salary, but should have comparable salaries internally. In other words, do you want one department head making $90,000 that's, supervising a pretty good amount of employees, but you may have a department head that may not be supervising as many employees, but may be working 70 hours a week because of more meetings, et cetera. So do you want to consider making sure all your department heads line up more equally? Same thing goes for mid-level managers, whether it's you've got a police lieutenant compared to a fire lieutenant, should they be comparable? Should entry-level firefighters be comparable to entry-level police officers? You can read countless articles, countless journal articles from academics that will make an argument either way in terms of which position is more important and more valuable to the city. And as policymakers, that's one of the things obviously you've got to consider is which position is more valuable and more important to Starkville. And in the end, again, it's not scientific. It's basically a collection of data that hopefully will be a good guide for you guys as you look at it over the coming weeks, especially with personnel director or your chief administrative officer or any budget committees that may be responsible for sitting down and analyzing this. And what I would love to do over the coming weeks is, one of the advantages I have is, I'm in Starkville as well. And, there's no contract involved with this. There's no money attached to this. And I will be more than willing to work with you if it's on a weekly basis to make sure we get all of your recommendations considered. We get all of the cities that you want to look at. We want to make sure that it's a useful document for you to use in next year's fiscal year. If you're losing a lot of sanitation laborers to West Point because their entry-level salary or wage is a lot higher, obviously you may want to focus on that. Obviously, you don't want to train employees and then have high turnover when they lose to another city over 50 cents more an hour, which ends up costing you more in the long run. So where do we go from here? Obviously, like I said, would love to sit down with Randy and Lynn on making any adjustments that you have any questions about tonight and looking at. But I'm still happy to answer any questions that you have tonight. Again, I know you've only had this for a number of days, and it's been over a holiday weekend, and you may not be fully prepared to ask any detailed questions, but I'd love to, help out with any questions that I could tonight.
Alderman Carver.
How do we compare, since we're just really discussing the mayor or the alderman salary, how do the aldermen compare to comparable cities within Mississippi for code charter?
That is, and to tell you the truth, I was kind of caught off guard when I saw the actual agenda that was on, that y'all were going to be talking about it tonight, because in the actual survey that we put together, normally we don't include elected officials or part-time employees, whether it's a city attorney that may be part-time or elected officials that are part-time. I can if I had those numbers in front of me, it could, and I know you're your budget committee, I know Ms. Sistrunk has been actively involved with it, but
And if I may, the numbers that are in the agenda tonight for the Board of Aldermen and for the mayor were taken from the average of, I think there were 8 or 9 cities that were similarly sized to the city of Starkville here in the state of Mississippi, and I believe it was a 2010.
The last thing survey that was available online.
So it was, this is, the numbers that are proposed are the average, so we're below the average currently.
Are these the 8 that, some of the 8 that are on the same salary
I don't
survey?
remember what the 8 were, but
Trying to think, we used-
Columbus,
We used a bracket between 20,000 and 30,000 in population, basically, and only threw one of them out, and that was Vicksburg, because they had a $68,000 alderman salary. So the average then became 15,000 to $100.
and nobody argued to leave it in, so.
and to follow up on that, and, you know, that's focusing on Mississippi, I can almost say with complete certainty, if you looked at the other southeastern states, it's
Well
much,
below.
much higher.
In other states.
Than what you're compensating here.
Jeff, just to be clear on the bar graphs that you have in your report, those are means and the bell curves of all the data you collected, not of the city of Starkville information, correct?
Correct, and it's just an example of how the person that actually crunched the numbers in SPSS and how she used it to
Okay.
crunch the rest of them. Just a few examples of how she did that. And please don't ask me any detailed SPSS questions.
Gotcha. I won't.
Further questions or comments for Dr. Moore? Alderman Sistrunk.
What I'm hearing is that this is raw data, and that we need to take some time to review it, look at the detailed information that supports this raw data, and decide how we want to go forward as a city. Is that right?
Exactly, and, you know, this is just the external data. And to me, that's only half of the process. The other half is looking at the internal part, such as who are your most valuable employees in terms of, you know, importance to the city? How long have these employees served in certain positions? If you've got, you know, a sanitation laborer that served effectively and one of your best employees for 28 years, obviously, you know, you want that person making more than someone that's been for 15 years. And a lot of that's been corrected, I know, but there's so many factors internally that I would advise you to look at instead of just taking this at face value. And I know it looks alarming at first, but it's the same way every time we present one of these without, you know, sitting down and working with it and using it as a guide, because there's tendency in this, there's certain parts that are flawed because of what I mentioned that we've got to look at, and we've got time, hopefully, you know, over the coming weeks to, you know, make this a usable document.
Well, I appreciate your willingness to continue to work with us as we refine this, and I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to move that we refer this to the Budget and Audit Committee for comprehensive review and a recommendation back to the board for a transition plan to update our current salary system.
Have you reduced that to writing?
I have, sort of.
Shorthand.
All right, Alderman Sistrunk has made a motion, which she has reduced to writing, and as she has just read it as written without objection, I will not reread it. Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Alderman Carver. Alderman Sistrunk, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No, but I would like to ask Ms. Spruill, our next Budget and Audit Committee meeting is,
Would be the third Wednesday.
so if that works with your calendar, Dr. Markham.
This is the 16th of
Further discussion?
I'm just gonna ask if you would, Dr. Markham, to give all the aldermen at least a copy of the thorough data of this. I find this pretty interesting.
Sure.
I'd like to see it.
And it would be easier, Alderman Carver, to send it electronically because it's mostly in spreadsheets. If that would be okay, I could send it to, if no one has any objection with their email address, to sending it that way.
Okay.
And if you have any suggested reading material that we can use to help us educate ourselves a bit more about the process.
Further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Alderman Sistrunk's motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. Is there any further discussion with Dr. Markham? Seeing none, thank you, Dr. Markham. All right, the next matter before you is the consideration of authorizing the city staff to take all actions necessary to initiate the development of the property located at 101 Meg Street, the former City of Starkville Electric Department building, included but not limited to property acquisition, the remediation and demolition of the building, the erection of construction fencing and signage, identifying and modifying right-of-way as necessary, amending the parking and traffic flow from future construction, and used to be funded from line item number 001-600-901-812. This matter comes before you as a result of the recent Chancery Court decision which validated the city's issuance of certificates of participation to build a new city hall. This project is a little bit behind its construction schedule that was originally laid out because we had an extended litigation period. Now that also means that the lease obligations will run behind on this project as well. You had budgeted $345,000 for fiscal year 2013 to make the first lease payment. Well, now we know on the timeline as of today that that first lease payment is not going to be due until fiscal year 2014. So this is a proposal that would move forward with using some of those funds to catch up some on the construction timeline, doing some of the site work immediately, namely demolishing that building and preparing the site for the actual construction project that would begin later this year. I can't say for certain that it would get us exactly back on the construction timeline, but I think it would make up a good bit of the lost time and probably put us in good shape for the project to be completed or near complete by the end of 2014.
So moved.
Motion has been made by Alderman Sistrunk to authorize the city staff to take all actions necessary to initiate the development of property located at 101 Meg Street, the former City of Starkville Electric Department building, including but not limited to property acquisition, the remediation and demolition of the building, the erection of the construction fencing and signage, identifying and modifying right-of-way as necessary, and amending the parking and traffic flow for future construction and use to be funded from line item number 001-600-901-812. Alderman Sistrunk, is that your motion?
I believe so.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Corey. Alderman Sistrunk, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No.
Discussion.
Well, I've got one question. Exactly, the property acquisition, what other pieces of property would it be?
Yeah, it's the property that's currently owned by the electric department. And that property appraises for $90,000. So what this would be the initial down payment on the property, and then when the certificates are sold, the payoff would come on the property.
Is this going to impede the traffic flow right there? I mean, is it going to stop the traffic in front of the?
It's not going to stop it. You will close one lane right there on the bend at Meg Street. So Meigs will have one-way traffic.
You're just going to be a cone out there or something?
Yeah. Further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed, please signify by raising your hand. By a vote of 4 in favor with 3 against, this measure passes. Next matter before you is a report from the Audit and Budget Committee. Ms. Spruill?
Thank you, Mayor and Board. The Audit and Budget Committee met on December the 19th this past year. I'm not used to saying that yet. And we took up 3 items. One was the status of the 2012 fiscal year audit, the tax collection contract, the Mayor and Board of Aldermen compensation, and then EMSOF funding for ambulance services. The audit report is basically that it is on target, and we should be receiving that information here very shortly. Mr. Scrivener was very complimentary of Mr. Adams' staff and how helpful they've been and how they've been very timely with all the information he needed. So we're looking forward to that coming forward to us very soon. I think end of January was one of the dates that he had said, assuming a couple of things came together for us. So then the tax collection contract is something that we are awaiting information from the county on as to what they want to do about that. And once we receive that information, then we'll bring it back to the board for further discussion and consideration. The Mayor and Board of Aldermen compensation is on here because of a unanimous vote by the committee to bring that forward as a recommendation to increase the funding or increase the salaries for the alderman to $15,000 and the mayor for $71,500. It's been previously discussed with Mr. Markham being here that those were averages that we had gleaned from the Stennis study that was on the internet, the latest study. And then the EMSOF funding is also on here. It was a unanimous recommendation by the committee to defer that funding or that payment to the hospital for the ambulance service and redirect those funds to the contingency fund. We were unable to achieve the grant this year, and we've made one payment on that, and we don't have offsetting grant funds, so the thought was that that payment would then be rolled into the contingency fund.
Questions or comments for Ms. Brew? Any questions or comments from the members of the board for Ms. Brew? All right, seeing none, we'll move into discussion on the first matter, which is consideration of a unanimous recommendation from the Audit and Budget Committee to increase the compensation for the mayor and board of aldermen from $12,000 annually to $15,000 annually, and from the mayor from $60,000 annually to $71,500 annually. Discussion.
This is not a popular motion for anybody to make, particularly in an election year, but because of the way salaries are set for elected officials in the state of Mississippi, the options are to do it for one board to set the rates for the next board. That way, you're not setting your own salary, and that's a little different from perhaps some of the other elected officials' salaries that are set here. The board recognized that our salaries, along with employee salaries, fall behind averages, and we're trying to take this process forward to get everybody's salaries more in line with other entities in the state. At the time that we made this recommendation, we did not have the Stennis Institute information. We did delay the start date on this to fiscal year 14 to allow for some transition time. Given that we've gotten the Stennis Institute information and that we perhaps have a good bit of work to do with employees as opposed to, or in addition to elected officials, I'd like to make the motion that we adopt these rates that are here, but with an effective date of October 1, 2014, essentially for fiscal year 15, which puts us squarely in the middle of a transition plan for the city employees, but moves us all along on that path toward a more something that's more in line with state averages. So, if I may make my motion now, I move that we increase the compensation of the mayor and board of aldermen from $12,000 annually to $15,000 annually, and the mayor from $60,000 annually to $71,500 annually, effective October 1, 2014.
Alderman Sistrunk has made a motion to increase the compensation of mayor and board of aldermen from $12,000 annually to $15,000 annually, and the mayor from $60,000 annually to $71,500 annually, effective October 1st, 2014. Alderman Sistrunk, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Corey. Alderman Sistrunk, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No, again, the numbers we chose were a rounded average. I think they're actually probably a little below the average for similarly sized cities in the state of Mississippi. And we do recognize that there are salary issues to be addressed with city employees too, and we're trying to do these in conjunction with that. If we don't act on this tonight, the next time that these salaries can be addressed, or at the earliest, will be the board that is seated in 2017. It's been it's been at least 2 terms, I believe, since these salaries have been addressed. So 8 years. This will be about 10 years since the last salary change for alderman and mayor.
Further discussion. Alderman Carter.
Is this something that we can't discuss? I mean, I know it's just customary practice of the Board of Aldermen. I know Mr. Bill can probably tell us that, but is this something we have to do this year for the next board, or is this something we can discuss in 014 for 015? This is not a state statute.
The city attorney doesn't know the answer.
Well, it's not a state statute, so. Anybody in here been on salary before? Got anybody honest? I have. Anybody in here on salary, give yourself a raise if you could? Nobody's on. I can't do it. I've got city employees calling me left and right today, from all departments that are upset about it. And if it's not a time-sensitive issue, which it's not, and if it's something we can take up next year, you're right, let's look at the city employees, and then after that, if it's in conjunction with it, let's do it as a second piece of the salary increase and not the first, but I can't support it tonight, so.
Well, a potential course of action is to allow the city attorney to research it and bring back an answer as to whether lawfully it has to be increased either now or in the term of the 2017 board.
Mr. Mayor, we got a motion on the floor.
We do.
Ready to vote.
Having discussion. Alderman Dumas.
So we're looking at, if I'm doing the math here, that's 32.5, roughly 20% overhead. You're at 40 grand basically a year. Looking at salaries and overhead on these raises. Is that about right? Yeah. You're wanting it to take effect the beginning of FY15. 14. And it'll have, well, calendar year 14, FY15 though. So you'll have, so you think from a timing standpoint that's also a transition time for the salaries of the employee
I'd like to think so.
process?
I'd like to think so. I'd like to think that I don't know what the numbers are gonna be because we don't have the detailed information about the city employees, so we don't know how many dollars we're talking about and whether it's something that can be implemented in a single year or will take 2 or 3 years to implement. And so this is, at most, I would like to think that we could accomplish this, the city employees over a 3-year period, fiscal 14, 15, and 16. This would put the Board of Aldermen and the mayor squarely in the middle of that transition,
And that'd give you-
assuming that it takes 3 years.
But that'd give you 2 budget cycles to work through the process of not only budgeting for this $40,000 roughly, but also the transition point of that.
It would, and if Alderman Carver's correct, and if it's not a state statute that requires this, the next board can unwind this and set the salaries at whatever they want to set them at.
I'll be the first to admit, I think we are out of line with the work we do. The irony of this coming forward with the, like I said in the paper, with all the stuff that's been talked about with taxpayer dollars is something that was interesting, but I do think that this is something, especially with the time-sensitive nature of this in terms with the timing of how we can do it. Now, that's something I don't know the answer to, if it's statute or not. I do think that would be a good answer to know. But regardless of that, I think it's something that needs to happen, just based on the work that we do. I wholeheartedly agree with the fact that it needs to be done in line with the employee compensation package. And so if what you're saying is true, then the next board won't come in and take these raises. They'll wait one full fiscal year to then seat the raises as well as their transition phase to employee raises. Okay, yeah, I can support that.
I don't understand the haste, quite frankly. And of course, my opinions on this subject are well stated at this point. But we've heard a staffing study that by the person making the presentation, admittedly at this point is raw data, and will require some work to determine how we need to develop a transition plan for getting the compensation of our employees in line with a peer group. And that is something tonight that this board has committed to do over the next several months. That will lead into budgetary decisions in the next fiscal cycles. Now, on the other hand, we've got some numbers that were hastily thrown together comparing salaries of board members and mayors around the state. Not refuting the numbers. I'm just saying that the time and detail in collecting as much raw data as possible has not been put into collecting those numbers. But I don't doubt that elected officials, as compared to peers, are underpaid, just as our employees are. And I won't refute that justification. My issue with this is, my personal opinion is, we should come last. I believe the positions that we have are positions of public trust. I think we accept a high burden when we seek these offices and campaign vigorously for them so that we can serve the public. And that burden that we are entrusted with is the tax dollars that the citizens of this community pay. And those tax dollars are there to ensure that infrastructure functions properly and to ensure that services are delivered in the best and most efficient way possible. Now, in my opinion, the very last interest that we should ever consider is the personal compensation that we receive for doing a job that is an honor and a privilege. Tonight, we heard the rough figures of a staffing study. And we know they are rough, and I will be the first to agree that there is much work to be done to determine exactly how we address what's presented in that study. But we know at a minimum that there is, on average, a 14% pay gap with a worker in the city of Starkville and the peer group in the study. Now, this proposal, on its own, it's not a huge proposal. This is the total price tag on this proposal is $32,500. In the context of a $16 million budget, that is not a great sum of money. But I have been through enough budgeting processes with the city now to understand how significant $32,500 can be. When you are at the end of a budgeting process, that is the last street that doesn't get paved, the last drainage project that doesn't get done, equipment for the fire department or the police department that doesn't get purchased, or, as is most often the case, pay equities with our employees that are not shored up. That is the can that continually gets kicked down the road. And I am very proud of this board as a whole for making that a priority in very difficult financial times. You've squeezed and scratched and clawed and found a way during this term to implement 5% worth of cost of living adjustments for the employees. And you've also addressed some internal equities, and you've gotten salaries above the poverty line when they needed to be. All of those are admirable, but we could all agree that we still have work to be done. Now, in this case, the figures that we're talking about is a board salary increase of 25% per board member and a mayor's salary increase of 19%. And I recognize that a very worthy case can probably be made as to how we lag that far behind. But the exact same case, and then some, can be made in respect of most of our employees. Now, this is based on principle for me. I can't justify doing something that I view as self-serving. And this is related purely to the potential increase in the mayor's salary. I would view, with the needs that I see in this city, a 19% increased pay package for a job I hold as something that's self-serving. And I recognize the justification to this. The justification is this is not for this mayor and this board. We're going to have an election this summer, and that will be decided then. But I can't buy that justification when I fully plan on being here in October of 2013 and October of 2014. I can't, with a straight face, act like the pay raise that then comes just happened to fall in my lap when I was a part of the mayor and board that decided it. Now, we'll see what the answer to the legal question is. But in the event that I am not here, then whoever is here could deal with that question either for themselves or for a future mayor and board. But I am the one that's here now, and I have every intention of being here when this would be implemented, and I just can't stomach it. Now, that being said, I recognize this is a personal principle and belief, and I don't begrudge anybody that doesn't have that personal principle and belief. I don't think it is my prerogative to dictate to you what board member salaries ought to be. I think you're in a position where you can do that for yourselves. For that reason, if you limit this motion to a board member salary increase, I won't intervene. But I feel I have no choice but to veto this if it includes the mayor's salary increase. Any further discussion? Alderman Sistrunk.
I'd like to say that it is a privilege and an honor to serve, and you're right about that. And I'd like to confess that when I ran for the Board of Aldermen, I didn't know they got paid. So that was a pleasant surprise to me. So it's not about the money, but the money does speak to who's willing to sit up here and do these jobs. And so that's why I think it's important. I think it's important that we honor these positions and the work that we do by making reasonable payments to them. Politically, it's very unlikely to be taken up by a sitting board. And I think that our taking it up now is actually a much more transparent process than voting a raise on the way after the elections are over, which is whether it's legally required or not, is what frequently happens. So we are telling people that we're going to go down this path. We are being open and transparent about it. We will have to answer to our constituents as we go about our political campaigns. I say that it's a privilege and honor to serve, and it really is. And each of us that sits up here, I'm sure, feels the same way. None of us have turned down the paycheck. None of us. And so I think that we need to recognize that these are jobs too, in addition to a privilege and honor. These are jobs, and they're jobs that need to be recognized as what they are.
Alderman Carver.
I guess I agree with the mayor wholeheartedly in just saying it's a principal thing. And I know everybody up here, I guess other than Alderman Sistrunk, has got a full-time job. So that's at least 40 hours a week you're working plus this. So nobody could say that this is a full-time job unless you're doing this job during your regular hours. But that being said, so this has to be above and beyond the 40 hours other than Alderman Sistrunk. So 12,000 is plenty for me. I mean, that's more than enough. We could use this money for other things. I think there's other projects, street projects, capital improvements, salary and equities we could work on, things like that. But the 12,000, easy number. I'm fine. That's plenty for a part-time job.
Further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll now move into a roll call vote on Alderman Sistrunk's motion. Please answer yay, nay, or abstain as the city clerk calls your name.
All right, I looked at it. I checked the last time, and the last time we went 1-7, so we'll go 7-1 this time. In the interest of being fair to the folks at the other end.
That's
of the
fair.
debate. Alderman Vaughn.
Yay.
Alderman Perkins.
Yay.
Alderman Dumas.
Yay.
Alderman Corey.
Yay.
Alderman Parker.
Yay.
Alderman Sistrunk.
Yay.
Alderman Carver.
Nay.
By a vote of 6 in favor with 1 against, this measure passes. The next matter on the agenda is consideration of unanimous recommendation from the Audit and Budget Committee to make a budget amendment to recognize the loss of grant funding to the EMSOF service suspended payment to the hospital for ambulance service and reallocate those funds to the contingency fund. Does anyone wish to speak on this, or should I lead us off?
In our packet, what's EMSOF?
It's a grant program for emergency service providers.
So we lost a grant.
Yeah. Ms. Spruill, would you like to explain what happened with the grant?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We had to attend a class, and that class did not get scheduled, and we didn't attend it. So in essence, we received notice that without that attendance documented, we will not be receiving those grant funds.
So how does this play in any kind of contract form with the hospital as far as, is this the 30,000 we gave to the hospital, or?
No, it's $40,000.
$40,000.
This is $40,000, and if my understanding is correct, the grant was for $15,000. So the grant would have defrayed the $40,000 cost. Now, in this case, you've already budgeted $40,000. Your budget did not accommodate for the grant. So in spite of the fact that the course was missed and we will not be receiving the $15,000 grant this year, you have budgeted enough funding to fund the service. Now, let me explain to you a little bit about how this works. This is a cooperative arrangement, very much like the airport, very much like the horse park. Starkville, Oktibbeha County, and Mississippi State University all participate to help subsidize the service for the hospital. The county, the county is the agent that has the responsibility for having an ambulance service. County hospital is under no obligation to operate it, but they have operated it for at least 30 years. The county pays $234,000 annually for the service. The city pays $40,000 annually for the service, and MSU pays $30,000 for the service. Now, the service consistently loses money. This year, they budgeted a $397,000 loss for the service. The reason I would advise against pulling the funding is because we are all in this relationship together, and I can't tell you what Oktibbeha County, how Oktibbeha County is going to respond to the city pulling funding. I can't tell you how Mississippi State University is going to respond to the city pulling funding, and I can't tell you how the hospital is going to respond because they've got a service that they are running at a loss right now. So I would recommend that this motion not be passed because of the potential turmoil that it could throw our ambulance service into. And personally, I don't think we should wade into a decision that could jeopardize our ambulance service in the near future without knowing what the consequences are of it. Additionally, this is not a crisis. I think this is a manufactured crisis. We've got $40,000 that's budgeted. It's already been placed in the budget for fiscal year 2013. We are effectively taking that $40,000 from that line in the budget and putting it into the contingency line, which could threaten the ability of the hospital to provide ambulance service, and also raise concerns from the other parties that cooperate in providing this service.
Has any contact been made from somebody from the city to the county to notify that this is, going to be pulled from their budget, or?
I talked to Richard Hilton today, so he does know.
He does know what he said?
Well, he obviously said it would be problematic. You've got a service that's already losing funding, and it just adds to the loss that they're already incurring.
Well, this is one of those things you say, with Alderman funding 32.5 here. I mean, this is a good example right here that you're basically taking the same amount of money from one fund and adding to the Alderman and mayor's salary. But I mean, I can't support this either. And I guess the mayor has a great point in saying that it's a manufactured crisis and that it's already budgeted for this year. I think it'd be good and safe to keep it, in the line item that it is and keep providing the service. I don't know that you want to create a problem in something as drastic as ambulance service.
Alderman Sistrunk.
May I make a couple of comments here? The hospital doesn't operate an ambulance service out of solely the goodness of its heart. It's a billable service to the hospital, and for them to say that the ambulance is going to operate at a loss means that they're parsing out one of their departments and saying that department is the one that is creating a loss. We're repeatedly told that the hospital is in good financial shape, that they're functioning quite well and are showing a profit. We are subsidizing the hospital currently through debt service on general obligation bonds that the county authorized a couple of years ago for an expansion project of the hospital, and so we're paying 6 to 7 mils in taxes annually to support the hospital. So I think that we very much support the hospital. Again, this is a billable hospital service. They receive federal dollars for uncompensated care, so there's one source of funds to make up the loss that they're talking about. It is not a great deal of money, but it does address something that we've learned recently, that we don't have these grant funds, that we didn't know when we were developing a budget, and it's not a crisis. It's not a crisis to the hospital. I don't think that it will cause them to cease their ambulance operations. We provide a lot of those first responder services through the fire department and through the police department. So we, the city, are supportive of those kind of services too. But I think it's just a recognition, and perhaps the timing is awkward, but it's just a recognition of something that the budget committee learned and tried to rectify during this budget cycle.
How does it in any way relate to something that the budget committee learned? Because I could see how that would be the case if we had only budgeted $25,000. But since we budgeted $40,000, how does the fact that the $15,000 grant was not received in any way give rise to a budgetary issue?
I think it just allowed us to take a step back and look at those dollars in total, not just the grant, but the total contribution. And so it becomes an opportunity to evaluate that situation. And I recognize that there may be some ties to the hospital that makes this difficult for some of us sitting up here, but it was a process that came through that committee.
Is this
Alderman Carver.
Alderman Sistrunk, would this be something that would you be in favor of just tabling it? And, I mean, I know anytime we have a county, we all talk about cohesiveness between the city, county, and the university, and this is something that's a pretty giant step to take before. I guess today was the first contact with the hospital administrator, but at least make sure, I've got to have some kind of justification to make sure that we're not killing ambulance services or doing something that's going to, I mean, the one thing that's, you know, you talk about police and fire, this is one of the EMS service that I don't want to have a guilty conscience of doing something that hinders ambulance service of all things. I mean, the one life-saving thing, you know, I'd hate to do anything that affects it, the operability of it, or.
You're not. The hospital, again, they assure us that they're in good financial shape and.
Have you talked to Mr. Hilton?
No, but John Montgomery has, and John, Mr. Hilton assured John Montgomery that that was the case. I've read that in the newspaper. I've looked at financials that were available, not this past year, but the prior year, and they can certainly bear $25,000 or $30,000 at this point. They can bear a $30,000 loss in funding from the city.
Do we have a motion, Ben? We need a motion.
So let me just ask a question here. The grant, how long has this arrangement between the city and the hospital been in place? And then how long has that grant been in place? And when did it fail?
The arrangement with the city and the hospital has been in place for at least 30 years. I don't know how long the grant's been in place. Chief Mann, do you know how long the current EMSOF program has been in place?
Mayor, as far as the fire department assistant OCH, that was going on in the early 80s when I come aboard. That's about all.
So you don't have any familiarity with the EMSOF grant program. Lynn, do you have any familiarity?
The grant is under the police dispatch.
Oh.
Budget line item, and I don't know how long that grant has been in place, and I'm not quite sure. I think it fluctuates. I do not know how long it's been in place.
Do the other entities, the MSU, the county, do they use grant funding to support their share of the?
The county does. I do not think
Through
MSU
the similar,
uses
the similar grant?
grant. Through a similar grant program. The counties may even be larger because they have a larger portion, but I can't tell you how the county's grant program works. Is it larger?
And don't lose sight of the fact that ambulance services are billable services. They are covered medical
Well, believe
services.
me, I've ridden in there with my child and know full well what those
That
things
you will
cost.
get a bill. You will get a bill from the
Full well.
hospital for that ambulance
Yeah.
service. So.
And I guess that's the fuzzy line with me is why when a revenue generating entity is receiving tax dollars, if it was grant dollars, that's one thing. But when we're paying a revenue generating entity, that isn't interesting. And I understand the connection with the horse park, and we've had these same kind of discussions with horse park.
And we cut their funding.
And we have
this
cut
year.
their funding. That's
Didn't
right.
cut it completely.
And so I think that's,
Do we have a motion, Mr. Mayor?
We do not have a motion.
Okay. So I will make a motion for something.
I'm going to be the bad guy tonight. I'm going to make all the controversial motions tonight. I move that we recognize the loss of grant fund, or I move that we suspend the remainder of payments to the hospital for ambulance service and reallocate those funds to the contingency fund.
Alderman Sistrunk has made a motion to suspend the payment to the hospital for ambulance service and reallocate those funds to the contingency fund as presented. Alderman Sistrunk, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Perkins. Alderman Sistrunk, you wish to speak on the merits?
I think we've danced that dance.
I've got a question. Any other group that we give outside monies to, such as this, Horse Park, PDD, we ask for audited financials, we ask for presentations, budgets, those kind of things. Why is this something that has been different in the past?
You want to speak to that, Ted?
I will. I cannot speak to why we have not requested financials from the hospital in the past, but they have been willing to give them to us in this year. And I asked for them and they gave them to us, so. That's, but I mean, before this year, I don't know.
And let me say this as a caveat, not because I'll support this motion, but I'm short of saying this is an amendment. I think it's very important, any type of outside contribution is this, when you talked about the horse park and you talked about the others, that we treat all similarly situated individuals the same in this process, so that we require justifiable steps that these other outside organizations go through when they seek taxpayer monies through outside contributions. And obviously, this is one that has not been asked to do so. So in the event that they want or need this money, I think it's justifiable if they go through those steps as other organizations do from an outside contribution standpoint, so that we can all look at them together through the budget process, because it is a use of monies from a revenue generating thing, just as you talk about the horse park and others. So I think that's important to note, if and when, and I think it's not a matter of if, but when the hospital comes back and asks for these monies back, that they go through the same process as other groups, so that they can be looked at as a collective whole, as part of the outside contribution list of what the overall budget is.
That seems fair.
Further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll now move into a roll call vote on Alderman Sistrung's motion.
All right, this time, we'll go 1 to 7. So, yeah. Alderman Carver.
Nay.
Alderman Sistrunk.
Yay.
Alderman Parker.
Yay.
Alderman Corey.
Nay.
Alderman Dumas.
Yay.
Alderman Perkins.
Yay.
Alderman Vaughn.
Yay.
5-2.
By a vote of 5 in favor with 2 against, this measure passes. The next matter on the agenda is a report and recommendation from the Chief Administrative Officer on the status of existing boards, commissions, and committees. Ms. Spruill?
You're on board again. If you will look in your packet, I went through the boards and commissions that we had on the direction of the board from the last board meeting. And essentially, we have 22 current boards, commissions, committees, whether they're standing or ad hoc. And in essence, we have, of the ones that we are currently dealing with that are statutorily created or have been created by an ordinance, we have the Golden Triangle Regional Airport Authority, the Starkville Housing Authority, Municipal Airport Board, Library Board of Trustees, Octavia Hall County Heritage Museum, Starkville Park Commission, the Planning and Zoning Commission, Board of Adjustments and Appeals, Starkville School Board, Golden Triangle Solid Waste Authority, Municipal Election Commission, the Historic Preservation Commission, and the Stormwater Hearing Board. Those are the ones that remain viable. They haven't, for example, the Stormwater Hearing Board has never met, but that's not to say that there won't be an option, and it was created by ordinance. So I think those would be ones that we want to retain. The ones that have had trouble making a quorum or have had trouble even getting membership are the Beautification Committee, the Commission on Disability, Comprehensive Planning Committee, and the Solid Waste and Recycling Committee. The ones that I am making a recommendation that we remove or that we eliminate are the beautification, those 4, the Beautification Committee, Commission on Disability, Comprehensive Planning, and Solid Waste and Recycling. My recommendation is that the Commission on Disability be put in with the Transportation Commission. You take 2, yes, sir.
I wouldn't cut you off on.
That's okay.
I totally agree with you on that. The Transportation Committee at the time has two seats, right, that are,
Well,
transportation is.
it's got 1 vacancy. Your ward has a vacancy. That was Dr. Stitch was in that position, and that's vacancy. What I was recommending is that it stay as it currently exists. Just add 2 members who would be from the Commission on Disability to that, because that's one of those items that they take up regularly and they're very involved in. But the Commission on Disability has had difficulty making a quorum and getting membership over the last year or so.
So you're recommending taking, I read this report, you're recommending taking the 3 that are left on the Commission on Disability and just add them with transportation?
Well, I was just saying 2 out of that. But if the board wanted to do 3, you certainly could do that. But I was recommending that 2 be added to the Transportation Commission. And Transportation Commission is still meeting. I think they've begun to slow down a bit, but one of the things they were going to do was do a master plan for sidewalks for the city. Alderman Dumas was the board liaison to that, and I think that there may be another charge out there, maybe even a street overlay, a master street plan that they were going to look at doing. But that involvement has been fairly strong. They made a report to the board not too long ago, and I think that interest is still there. But I haven't
And
been.
I think they're okay. I'll talk to Richard about that, about the combining of the committees. I don't think that will be an issue.
No, and I'm willing to defer as liaison to the Commission on Disability for Jeremiah to remain as the sole
Yeah,
alderman.
I think both committees will be okay with that.
Okay, all right. Well, anyway, that was part of my recommendation. And on the Tree Advisory Board, again,
I'll
one
speak to
that's currently active, they're about to wrap up their work on the landscape ordinance, and I'm recommending that once they do that it sunset and not come back into existence unless and until there's something else that comes up that the board is desirous of them taking up.
Well, and they're looking at two different things. One of the, they are working and have been communicating with several of the garden clubs in town to look at a Tree City USA thing, and I know Ms. Sproul's working on that.
We submitted it.
Yeah, and there's other things that they're looking at from a tree preservation standpoint. So the sunsetting on that is something I'm not willing to look at now, because I think there's some later work there that could be done there. And most notably is one of the things in the landscape ordinance is like the Stormwater Hearing Board. They've been very, very active over the last, not the Stormwater Hearing, the landscape, or the Tree Board, over the last year and a half, and they've finally got a document, and they're working diligently with the development group in Starkville to pull together interested parties who would actually be affected by this to look at the process, and that goes in, and one of the models they're looking at is the Stormwater Hearing Board. So I think the sunsetting can be done at a later time once they get that variance process in there, because they're trying to look at it from a development standpoint now. So yeah, that's definitely later down the road. I don't know if that's something we'll look at tonight.
Okay, all right. Well, and the remaining recommendations would be the internal committees, which are the Technology Committee, the Audit and Budget Committee, and the Infrastructure Committee. Technology Committee has not met in quite some time. Audit and Budget is quite active. And then the Infrastructure Committee has not met in quite some time, so.
And let me just say that with our new IT staff, we haven't had to meet in a while. That's a compliment.
And that's part of this, is that we have been very successful in serving some of the needs that brought these committees into existence. So that's the sort of the genesis of my recommendation. So that would put us down to the ones that are in essence statutorily created, and then we can do away with some of them. Or you can reconvene another committee to address an issue that you might find relevant in the next year or so, or whenever. So.
And if I could speak real quickly about the Commission on Disability, I served as the liaison, and now Alderman Corey is serving as the liaison. They have had, despite actively looking for members, had a great deal of difficulty in finding people who were willing to serve on that committee. Since that commission was established, we have taken steps to have an ADA coordinator here within the city, and so some of the things that they were having to do in that commission, we're now handling in-house. And I think there's been the awareness of those kind of issues have been tremendously raised by that commission. So their work was has served our community well, and I think that they can continue to have that sort of influence through the Transportation Committee and working with the ADA coordinator.
And if the board decides that this is what they'd like to do, then I will change the organization structure of the Transportation Commission. We created bylaws for it, so we'll make those things fit what the board's desire is. So
I move approval of all recommendations minus the Tree Advisory Board sunsetting.
Alderman Dumas moves approval of all of Ms. Sproul's recommendations minus the Tree Advisory Board sunsetting as presented. Alderman Dumas, is that your motion?
Yes.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Corey. Alderman Dumas, do you wish to speak on the merits?
I do not.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Alderman Carper.
I totally agree with that, but as far as maybe an amendment or something, how do we, are y'all gonna do word of mouth? Do you send a letter?
We'll mail them.
Email?
We mail everybody that rolls on the letter. We'll just send a letter to everybody whose committee no longer exists.
Might be nice to make a phone call too. So,
Well, I think as the other alderman has said, though, I mean, there's been situations arise where problems have been solved, that those boards were created, committees created for a reason, but I mean, the people that we're talking about, the committees that we're dissolving have been excellent as far as advisory type situations and things. And sometimes, like Commission on Disability, you've seen some of the work they've done for the sidewalk and other things that, they need to be noted. And again, that was back to my original question, if we could just send some kind of letter of thanks to them for serving in their capacity.
Further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Alderman Dumas's motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. The next matter on the agenda, speaking of committees, is making appointments to the City County Airport Board, Golden Triangle Regional Solid Waste Authority, and the Oktibbeha County Library Board. Discussion.
So help me through a list here of who all we've gotten, because I know there's 3 at the table. Are those the total?
There's an additional one in your key packet from Mr. Richardson, who was currently on the airport board, and his term ended, he's requesting a reappointment. So you have in essence 4 letters of interest. Mr. Adams did not submit a letter of interest. He and I just had a discussion about the vacancy on the Golden Triangle Solid Waste Authority, and he indicated a willingness to serve at a time when we had not received any letters of interest, so. And that was at when the e-packet went out on Friday.
That was the position that Ms. Outlaw vacated?
Ms. Outlaw vacated.
Is there-
She's no longer living in the city, and at the time she was there by virtue of being a city employee.
So is that one of those positions that is sitting as a citizen, or is it the city clerk? I mean, does it have to be the
No, it's
designation?
not city clerk.
It's any citizen?
Yes. it's a citizen.
Okay, so it doesn't even have to be a city
No,
employee?
for example, Mr. McLaurin is on that board, and Mr. Webb is on that board for the city.
But I'm-
I sit on it as well, and then we have basically one remaining vacancy.
It's a position that's, all those are, as just as citizens, or they don't have any kind of designation? Okay.
Alderman Parker.
I can try to do one real quick. We can, I move that we reappoint Jimmy Richardson to the airport board.
All right, motion has been made by Alderman Parker to reappoint Jimmy Richardson to the airport board. Is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Dumas. Alderman Parker, do you wish to speak on the merits? Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. Back in discussion on the general matter. Alderman Parker.
I didn't get ahead of you. Let me just, wasn't intending to say anything, but let me just give you a little quick background information on the position that Ms. Outlaw had. Ms. Outlaw was appointed to a position on the Golden Triangle Solid Waste Board back in the late 90s, maybe 98 or 99. At the time that she was appointed, she was a deputy clerk in the city clerk's office. She was appointed to fill an unexpired term. Ms. Vivian Collier was city clerk at that time. Ms. Outlaw's appointment to the Golden Triangle Waste Board did not have any thing to do with the fact that she was a deputy clerk in the city clerk's office, nor did it have anything to do with operation. That was just the will of the board at that time to appoint Ms. Outlaw to fill that term. And I just wanted to give the board that historical background on her appointment, and she filled an unexpired term. So I just wanted to make the board aware of that. One other thing I want to say, I want to say this as a preface here, and I was hoping I didn't get to put in this position because I don't know what the motion is going to be that's going to come up next. But we have 2 fire department heads, Ms. Emma Gandy, who is the Director of Sanitation Environmental Services, and Mr. Taylor Adams, who's our city clerk. They both doing a good job, and I was hoping that could be worked out without our having to vote. I mean, I don't want to vote for or against either one of them. I mean, I'm just going to tell you just like it is. That's just the bottom line. I don't know, Mr. Brewer, maybe you can work that out for us, but I'm not willing. I'm not going to cast a vote for or against either one because I don't want them to view Alderman Perkins. Well, selecting one or the other. I mean, it's good they both express a willingness and then a letter of interest, okay? But I just wanted to say that, and depending on the motion, I'll make sure my vote reflects what I just said.
Well, and Mr. Nobles is in the audience, and you have a letter from him as well expressing potential interest.
Yeah, and I just want to, you done? Ms. Sproul, you are a department head that can represent the city, and this is no disrespect to either of y'all, but Ralph Nobles is a dear colleague of mine on campus, well, for the next couple of weeks anyway. Ralph has represented the university on this Golden Triangle Authority for, I guess, as many years as you've been on campus. He's the director of utilities. He's very knowledgeable about waste systems and what they do, and he's an engineer and other type things, and I think he'd be, in his retirement, he said he got a boat, so I know he's going to have plenty of time with his boat and others to work on this. So I'll make one motion combining the two of them so that Alderman Perkins does not have to do that. And I say this in knowing that the city is well represented through the people that we already have on there. I move that we nominate Nancy Walsh to the library board and Mr. Ralph Nobles to represent the city on the Golden Triangle Solid Waste Authority.
Alderman Dumas has made a motion to appoint Nancy Walsh to the library board and Ralph Nobles to the Golden Triangle Solid Waste Authority board. Is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Parker. Alderman Dumas, you wish to speak on the merits?
I do not.
Any discussion? Alderman Sistrunk.
I'd like to say I think that's a fine compromise, and I'd also wish that I had gotten to second something non-controversial tonight, so.
Nice, young.
Further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. The next matter on the agenda is the consideration of approving the payment of the amount owed in accordance with the order for dismissal in the matter of City of Starkville versus MCCO Construction. This is just approving payment for the settlement that you've already approved. That payment is actually quickly coming due, and it didn't make it on the claims docket, and we probably would have technically been late if we had waited till the next board meeting. Motion has been made by Alderman Dumas to approve the payment of the amount owed in accordance with the order of dismissal in the matter of City of Starkville versus MCCO Construction LLC et al. As presented. Alderman Dumas, that's your motion? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Sistrunk. Alderman Dumas, you wish to speak on the merits?
I do not.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes.
Move approval.
Fire department claims docket?
Yeah, he's out there.
Oh, okay. Motion has been made by Alderman Dumas to approve of the City of Starkville Fire Department claims docket as of December 28, 2012. Alderman Dumas, that's your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Alderman Sistrunk. Alderman Dumas, you wish to speak on the merits?
I do not.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
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 By a vote of 4 in favor with 2 against, this measure passes. The next matter on the agenda is the request for approval of the City of Starkville claims docket for all departments except for the fire department as of December 28, 2012.
So moved.
Motion has been made by Alderman Corey to approve of the claims docket for all departments except for the fire department as of December 28, 2012. Corey, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Dumas. Alderman Corey, do you wish to speak on the merits? Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
By a vote of 4 in favor with 2 against, this measure clearly passes. The next matter on the agenda is a presentation by Emma Gandy, the Sanitation and Environmental Services Director, on progress in the department. Looks like Mr. Clement's getting you set up, and then it's all you.
could have.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Well, I'm going to take just a brief moment to give you a very, very brief update on the latest progress in the sanitation department. When we first look at the department, of course, we want to go over the services that we provide, and those are the residential trash collection and recycling. We have commercial trash collection. We have residential rubbish, landscaping and street sweeping, litter control, landfill operation, and thanks in part to a recent grant opportunity, we now have cold waste enforcement, solid waste enforcement. The department also consists of 34 dedicated employees. I do have a couple of my employees here. Mr. Weaver, who is a laborer for the, and he works as a floater. Mr. Weaver's main position is to take care of the downtown route, the business route for Main Street, and he handles what I call senior care. Mr. Weaver goes door to door to pick up sanitation and recycling for those residents who are disabled or seniors who cannot get those items curbside. And of course, everyone knows Mr. Ware, lead foreman for the department. I knew a lot of them would not be here to make it, but I did go get the opportunity to have some pictures made of them. And I want y'all to know that they are the heart and soul of the department. They do an excellent job. They are very willing, very cooperative, very knowledgeable of what they do. And as you can see, I have in there, they're not the postal workers, but when it comes down to it, rain, shine, sleet, or snow, you'll find them out doing what they do best. Let me go back one. So here I have Miss Carol Joy, who's the secretary. I have Miss Maggie Miles. Miss Maggie is courtesy of Experience Work. A lot of you know about the Experience Work where they put seniors back to work. So Miss Maggie is with us through Experience Work. We have Mr. Ware, we have Mr. Alvin Silvers, and Mr. Weaver. And then here we have several members of the sanitation that collects the sanitation and the recycling. The three gentlemen up top here are our commercial drivers. They drive the front end loader who takes care of most of the business route that have the dumpsters or the containers. This group of gentlemen, these are our rubbish. We have 2 drivers and 3 laborers, so that's our rubbish crew. The 3 gentlemen down at the bottom in the blue, those are our landfill workers. We have Mr. Barnes, Mr. Bush, and then Mr. Riley. And this group of gentlemen here in green, this is our landscape workers. So they're the reason that the city is manicured and the grass is cut and everything looks the way that it does. The group does, they all do an excellent job. They all participate in litter control when they come in early off of their routes. Then they all participate in litter control and making sure that the streets are clean and going back over. Of course, we do have some late putter-outers at times, and so we do some backtracking after, behind the routes. But they've all done an excellent job. So when we look back, right before I was appointed, we look back at the report that was made by the CAO to the board, and the report revealed the department in a financial stress. But measures were taken to stabilize the department, to assist it in for the remainder of the fiscal year. That report was presented right at the end of the fiscal year for 2012. So where we are now, we're here in the new fiscal year with a new budget. We've had a lot of activities to go on in the first quarter. We celebrated a 3rd year of recycling. We had a lot of people to come out. A lot of people were interested. Unfortunately, the majority of them stayed outside the city, but a lot wanted to sign up, and it was a great event. We did manage to sign up about 60, so that was a great event for us. We also have gotten approval for the new solid waste enforcement grant, a Mississippi DEQ. We know it's about $6,700. And that will help assist us with the salary for the code enforcement officer on the solid waste side. I recently completed the Mississippi DEQ certification training for landfill operation. The course, it was a 2-day course, and it pretty much goes through the aspect of opening, from the time you open a landfill to the time you close it. It lays out everything from how the pits should be created, to how the rubbish should be covered, to how it should be capped off at the end of the life of the facility. And thanks in part to your consent agenda, you just approved the repair for the weight scale at the landfill. What that is going to do, that is going to help with revenue. Right now, take the average garbage truck, one of our garbage trucks. The most that we could charge that truck coming in, based on cubic yard and what have you, is probably going to be about $90. But that same truck that goes to the 45 landfill is charged $300. So that's the type of revenue that we're losing because we don't have the scale in place.
Why would they not all go to you? I mean, if it's a third cheaper to go, 2/3 cheaper.
I'm sorry.
You're saying a garbage truck costs $90
No, I'm
next to you
saying,
versus
I'm saying that if
cubic weight.
if we had to build a garbage truck that
Just
size
that
coming
weight.
in, that's the only thing that we could charge it because we don't have a scale. The state say if you don't have a ticket to prove the weight, then you have to measure it by cubic yard.
So
And
how do you measure if you had a scale just by 90 is the most you can
exactly,
charge?
Exactly. And those rates are set by state code. We don't set those, so they are set by the state. So we can't increase them.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to say, because I'll probably get this question tomorrow, when you're talking about that, you are not talking about charging homeowners
No,
who are disposing, this is
business.
commercial.
This is business, yes. So continuing to look at this fiscal year, we look at our main objective. And our main objective for this year is to maintain the budget. Based on last year's budget, we're not rushing into anything. I'm viewing it and reviewing it again to make sure that we are going to be able to stay within compliance of this year's budget. But even within maintaining the budget and staying within budget, there still are areas of concern. Right now, we're at 75% remaining, which is great, considering that we just ended the first quarter. Of course, there are probably some slack invoices or lagging invoices that I have not gotten information on that may give us 73% remaining. But right now, as of this morning, from the city accountant, we're at about 75% remaining in our budget. But like I said, I do have some areas of concern, and two of my main areas of concern right now are going to be rubbish collection and recycling collection. And I'm going to discuss that a little bit later. I also want you to look at the fuel, some other issues. One of them is fuel. I've had the city accountant to pull some numbers for me, and I'm showing you this to let you know that that even though we're at 25% based on what we're budgeted and based on what we spent in the past, that's my concern, that the potential to not have enough fund in those line items are there. So in 2011, we budgeted $140,554. We spent $147. Last year, we budgeted $150. We spent $143. And this year, we budgeted only $110. So there's a potential there that if we continue on at the trend that we've done for the last couple of years, that we could possibly run out of funds prior to the end of this budget year. Same thing with
Now, let me ask about that. Why did we budget $40,000 less in fuel when our trend is not that?
the
when we
budget.
maintain
I
that?
can't, I didn't have any, the budget was set prior to my appointment.
Because that's all we have.
That's all we had?
That's it.
And the budget is based on, revenues generated. which
But
I'm
we
gonna go-
kept the same number of routes that generated that 143 and 147, correct?
Yes.
But you did have some fleet updates there for more efficiency.
Some efficiencies?
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, I mean, we budgeted what,
But
we
keep,
budgeted the maximum we
keep
could put
in
in the line
mind-
item. And this is before Miss Gandy was down there, so I'm not
Right.
trying, this is
No,
not me, you know.
but also keep in mind that the budget is based, the sanitation is an enterprise fund. It is budgeted on what we make, okay? And it is cut, I'm assuming it was cut based on what we make. So as we look at another division, we look at repair and maintenance, and this is for the landscaping department, and you have the same trending. 2011 we spent 21,000. We budgeted 21,000. We spent 26. 2012 we budgeted 16. We spent 28, and in 2013 we budgeted 100. We budgeted 20. And for the landfill, again, repair and maintenance. 2011 we budgeted 30. We spent 32. 2012 we budgeted 30. We spent 39. In 2013, we budgeted 10. The potential is there.
So now, and I'm guessing that is the same issue of new equipment, more efficient, so we don't have those repairs.
You do have some new dozers, or not new dozers, but used replacement dozers.
Right. We do have a replacement dozer, but like I said, I'm letting you know that the potential is there, because with this information, the first thing that came to my mind is that the equipment is getting older. It's not getting any newer, and we're gonna have maintenance issues. And unfortunately, when you look at a piece of equipment for the sanitation department, you can't compare it to a piece of equipment for police department or water department, because you're looking at a $250,000 truck as opposed to a $60,000 truck. So you're looking at the repairs are going to be different. So that our trucks cost more, and of course they cost more when it comes to repairs. We on this landfill, and I did not put it in there, I should have. We budgeted $10,000 for repairs. We've already spent $7,000 of that 10, and we're just into the first quarter. And that was based on what Ms. Debbie gave me this morning.
Wait, I'm sorry, say that one more time?
That we only budgeted $10,000, and we've already spent $7,000 for the landfill. Now, as we move forward, I know no one wants to talk about increasing anything.
Thank you for taking the heat off of me for a minute.
But the bottom line is that we are going to be looking at coming to the board. I am going to be coming to the board at a later time to ask for a $2 increase for sanitation rates. And those funds will be able to assist us in purchasing equipment. We have the containers, we have the trucks, I have 3 trucks listed there that we've had in and out of the shop. Both of them are more than 5 years old. We have the 2 that's 2002 models, and then we have the 1 that's a 2002 model. So at some point in time, we're going to have to look at recycling these trucks in and out and get them on a schedule. And this is going to help get us on that schedule. Right now, if one of those trucks went down, we're just not able. We're not in a position to purchase anything at this point.
So we have 3. I mean, Ms. Boyd had put us on a replacement program, right? Did she have some lease purchase, like 2-year lease purchase agreements with?
We don't have any. What the information that Ms. Clark gave me this morning, we don't have any 2-year. We have 2 trucks that'll be coming off in 2014, and I'm going to have to bring that one back up because I was surprised today on some things that Ms. Clark gave me. And I have 3 that'll be coming up in 2016.
Right. So that 4. So
right.
1. How many you saying 2014?
2014, 2.
2, and then 3
in 2016.
Okay. Well, are those all residential, or are those also front loaders, including front loaders?
3 are residential, and then 2 are front loaders. So that's
And I'm sorry. And those had like, didn't they have guaranteed buybacks? They had guaranteed,
I'll have to read the contract again on those. I'm not, I know it, when we were doing the bidding process, it did come up in discussion that, you and Ms. Boyd had, that we had at one point in time, but I'll have to read the contract to see how it's written up.
And I think the point, that, or an addendum to what Alderman Parker is saying is that we recognized that we had a very old fleet of equipment and that we were spending more in repair and maintenance than the fleet was worth. And so it was worthwhile for us to go ahead and make that investment in some equipment. I think some of this is catching us off guard in that we didn't realize perhaps that it was as that much more in front of us.
Also, as we move forward, for the landfill division, we're going to be looking at, I've been approached by owners of land that adjoins the landfill. The owners of the land, of the property is ready to sell. Now, I've talked with Mr. Posey at the county, and he seems to think that if the city is in agreement with, this is my first time even mentioning this to you. And the reason I haven't is because, to me, it puts us, it's a great thing if we're able to buy this property, if we can negotiate and sit down and talk with the sellers and get with the county to buy it. But we still have 2 vacant pits out there. And the last report to DEQ about the life of the landfill gave us 10 years. So we still have some, flexibility there. But then you also have to look at the fact, how long is the family's going to want to wait before they start, moving on. So, but the opportunity is there to purchase.
Does the county support the landfill at all?
The county does.
They do?
The county supports the landfill by 35% of the expense on general expense, and then 50% on capital improvement, capital expenditures rather. And like something else that we've just done, the repairing of the scales, like I said, that is going to create some more funds for the landfill. Hopefully, it'll put us in a position where we can actually generate more funds. It'll come with a new software system where we can have more data and be able to have a better record as far as those coming out and being able to collect those funds. Because I'll be coming up with a new program that before they come out, the problem that we've experienced in the past with collecting funds for the landfills is that we get people out there who don't give us information correctly. And we have all of these invoices and we have all of these invoices that we're not able to collect money on. So that puts us in, I think the last time I checked with the clerk's office, we had a $75,000 deficit that we couldn't collect on because we had been given bad addresses or what have you. With the implementation of the scale, what I'm going to get with Mr. Adams on at a later time is to have it so that the accounts are set up prior to people coming out, customers coming out to use the landfill, so that when they come out, they'll already have an account instead of us just having, word of mouth. We'll have the account set up through City Hall, and when they come out, we'll have the account information already on the system. And that should deter some of the non-payment that we've been experiencing with the landfill.
So gone are the days you can just take a load out there? I mean, you're gonna have to go register with City Hall before you take one load out there, or?
For businesses, now the residential customers still come out, to bring leaves and what have you. Now, there is a fee, there is an imposed fee for residents bringing out construction debris. But leaves, general cleanup, limbs, what have you, then no, there's not a fee for that. Also coming forward at a later time before you would be new business hours for the landfill. I've asked, and I should have provided that to you, and I do apologize also, but I have gained information from Mr. Barnes at the landfill. Right now, the landfill is open Monday through Saturday, and on Saturdays we have one person working. When I started, I really didn't know we had one person working. I honestly thought that we had 2. The landfill really needs to have 2 people on premises at all times. Because the pit, if any one of you have been to the landfill, you know where the gate is, you know where the pit is located. The pit is out of sight of the gate. So if you only have one person working and someone comes in, you can't send that person to the pit unmonitored. First of all, you don't know what could happen because they're out there unloading and anything could happen. And secondly, you can't leave the gate unmanned because you don't know who's going to come in while you're not there. Now, the reason I'll be asking that it be closed on Saturdays is because we went back and pulled all the tickets for Saturday. And on an average for the last year, they may have written 2 tickets. I think the most they've written on any given month was about 7 tickets, and that was for the entire month on a Saturday.
Commercial.
This is just entry because we record tickets for everybody. So that didn't necessarily mean that we even collected, that we even charged them. It could have just been a resident coming out. We've had several Saturdays where it was just open and no one showed up. And so what that is doing is, those are funds that we could be saving and putting back into the landfill by just cutting that one day and having everybody there Monday through Friday at the same time, regular schedule. And as you can see, I'll list, Monday through Friday with the last customer coming in at 3:30. That last customer coming in at 3:30 will give the workers the opportunity to walk the pit to make sure that we don't have any hot spots, to make sure that there is no one still, unmanned in the pit, to make sure that all of the entry points into the facility have been secured and that we don't have to worry about anyone entering it in after hours. Now, on the recycling collection that I mentioned earlier, I pulled this information again from information that Ms. Debbie gave me. And recycling is budgeted for $65,000, and rubbish division is budgeted for $445,061. Those two combined makes up 20% of the sanitation budget. And the reason that I'm pointing this out to you is because these are free services that we give away. And these services, without this increase, without the $2 increase, is going to be almost impossible to provide if the board does not make a decision on something for the department in the very, very near future. Recycling is great. Don't get me wrong, recycling is great, but recycling puts me in a catch-22 because if we want more people to sign up, but the more people sign up, the more it costs us to carry out. Right now, based on the number of people that we have signed up and what we have budgeted for in the budget to carry the $65,000, the city pays about $6 per customer to have this taken away.
So the more work, the more recycling is eating more of your budget.
Exactly.
And I would agree on this.
And the same thing with rubbish. Rubbish is a completely free service. Now, what rubbish has done is rubbish has taken away from landfill, because in the past where a citizen would have someone come in and clean their yard or what have you, and then that business would take those things out to the landfill. Well, now they're putting everything curbside. So our pickup on curbsides have gone up, which pretty much explains why you only have 2 people coming in on Saturdays, at the landfill, because our trucks are picking them up through the week.
And I think we need to look at that rubbish number. I mean, I specifically remember when we just took rubbish back over a year and a half ago, and the presentations that were made to us were, we can do it for $120,000, $140,000 a year for rubbish collection. And that was the one reason we took it back in-house, was because we could do it cheaper than we were paying it, having it contracted $445,000 is 4 times that amount. So, I mean, that's a huge number.
And I'm gonna say that all of these numbers are, they're based on really gross averages. I'm a recycler. I put out a fair bit of recycling, but I put out very little garbage. There are days that I don't put any garbage out, so, I like to think of what I pay the sanitation fee for being as much recycling as it is for garbage. And, I think the numbers could probably bear a little more review.
These are some of the issues that we have experienced since we've totally taken over rubbish. And this is just since I've been here. And this is where our code enforcement is going to come in. Just making everyone aware of the do's and don'ts, the cans and can'ts of rubbish and rubbish collection, and what can and cannot be put curbside. And a lot of that is going to lie in the hands of our code enforcement officer, of just public awareness and explaining to them, you know, what the codes say. A lot of them, when you start talking about the code, they'll say they don't know it, or but we're going to be providing them information that will assist them, and Jeff has done a great job in explaining to them when they come out. A lot of these pictures that you see, Jeff did come out on site, and he spoke with the owners, and so we were able to get those taken care of. But those are some of the issues that we've experienced, and those are definitely areas that we will need Jeff's assistance in.
Most of it being length over 4 or 8 feet, or the length of it.
Like this down here at the bottom, this is a couple of trees, and you can't see it, but to the left over here was a development. This group had just, were getting ready to build an apartment, or had built an apartment, or what have you. And this was part of their clearing.
Which I would 100% agree, we should not pick up and carry off, and
Right.
there should be a charge to.
And this is another solid waste issue that we're experiencing also. When it comes to our containers and the debris, wind-blown debris, and it goes back to those enclosures that these two locations here were grandfathered in, of course, so those containers were already there prior to the ordinance stating that you have to have an enclosure for this. But this area here, I think I got a call from Mrs. Trump on this one. This one is right at the entry to one of Long Meadow subdivision. And this debris here is wind blown from this area, from this trash can here. And then this area here is debris that is located behind this fence here. And this fence, these two containers are at a apartment complex. And so this, like I say, this is what we have, we've been dealing with on the solid waste side. On both of these, we got Mr. Lyles out. And I actually got my crew to come in and given the benefit of the doubt that the containers were full. And that's the excuse that I used to get them to clean it up, that the containers were full and this fell out. But I got my crew to clean this up, and 3 weeks later I got a call that it was back out. So what I have done with these two containers is, the apartment complex is owned by several owners, and we've sent letters informing them that the containers will be removed because of misuse of the containers, and that once they have erected the city, the enclosures according to the city ordinance, that we'll gladly bring those containers back out. But we did not go here because this was behind the fence, and this picture doesn't do it justice, but it was just debris scattered, you know, at least 30 feet on both sides of these two containers.
So if someone's in violation, even though they were grandfathered, once we remove their containers, to get those containers back, they have to build the enclosure.
Exactly.
Good.
And these will be, this is an old door hanger that I found down in Ms. Boyd's office that they used to use, and it gives you, it's a courtesy notice letting you know that you are in violation of the city's ordinance. And what we'll be doing, we're gonna update it some, because it does have some old rates there. So what we'll do is we'll update it, and we'll hang these on those areas that you saw. We'll hang these on doors and on businesses to let them know that there is a violation, you know, at your residence or what have you. We'll hang one on the debris itself, and we'll hang one at the door. And then we'll notify Mr. Lyles that we've hung these items so that he can begin to keep a record of them. And then he'll issue fines or violation according to his schedule. Also moving forward, I'm looking at additional grant opportunities. There are 2 grants that I have come across that I think would be great for the city. One is a household hazardous waste grant, and that is for household waste as aerosol cans, paint thinners, batteries. We have a lot of calls at the landfill asking about where can they dump these or where can they take these, and of course, our landfill does not allow it. But if we had this grant in place and we're able to take these items, then those are some things that we'll be able to collect and take advantage of. And also is the waste tire grants. And this is all gonna help with, dumping tires on the side of the road and what have you. Now, keep in mind, these are grants, and they, because of the department's finance, they will determine on whether, one, we can fund, the grant will cover the removal once we collect. And if we can find someone once I find someone within the vicinity who will actually come out and get it, then if we can provide those services at $0, then it would definitely be something that I would like to pursue. But if it is going to incur a fee, then it's going to be something that we will have to step back and look at and maybe review at a later time.
I have some information about some, I think a vendor that deals with battery recycling, excuse me, that I had a chance to meet with when I was at the National League of Cities Conference, and I'll be happy to share that information with you. And then in addition to that, if there's ever any opportunities down the line to look at what they call e-waste recycling or electronic recycling, I would really love to look at that. Old computers and motherboards and all those components that really don't need to end up in a landfill because they could spew toxic chemicals. And if I can help you with that in any way, please let me know, because that's something of interest to me. And I think they do something like that for the community once or twice a year. I may be wrong. I think Synergetics helps host it. And, I'll get you some more information on that, too.
Okay, thank you. So that concludes my presentation, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
Got my 2. I've got to bring up. The first is, I might have missed it, the street sweeper we already discussed a little bit today, and I saw that, but what are we gonna do?
The street sweeper is part of the $2 package, so to speak, because we have if we can get the funds. Right now,
we don't have a street sweeper running right now?
The street sweeper has been running for the last 3 days. We just recently got it out of the shop.
They were out Saturday. I saw them.
He was out Saturday. We're trying to do catch up. Right now, we only have the one. As most of you already know, that the sweeper from Mr. Edward had, Mr. Kemp had, is down, and so right now we're sharing, and so we only have the one, and it's been in the shop, 2 of the 3 months that I've been there. So we definitely, if we can get funding, that would definitely be one of the first items that we'll need to look at, and that is a street sweeper.
Second, I guess we're all concerned with the amount of trash, and I mean, it's something I just started noticing recently, and it's anything y'all can do, anything I can do to fund another. I mean, if we had somebody just picking, I know we got the workforce, the police department, things like that, but I mean, I think I encourage everybody in here to start looking and just noticing how much, and I know it's windy, it's been really windy lately, and I know that street sweeper's not been running, and I know some things like that.
We actually, like I said, the staff have done a great job that when they finish early, they come back, they go back out and start doing litter control. And we also have workers that, courtesy of the police department, that's, those citation workers that come down and assist us. So other than more public awareness, I don't know, because we can go down Industrial Park Road, for example, and clean it, and 2 days later, you know, it's like we've never touched it. So we're trying to stay on top of it, but it is really gonna involve the citizens getting in too, and assisting us with, you know, pointing out the violators, or bringing attention to, you know, those things. No one wants to drive home and see trash and what have you around their road, but we, you know, as quick as we can get it taken up.
I know it's not just.
I have ordered signs that will be going down Rock Hill Road, Industrial Park Road, and Reed Road. And those signs are littering signs. I don't think we have any in-town littering sign in the city limits. But those areas that we've really been hit hard with, and that we really have to maintain and monitor on a regular, are the ones that we're gonna post those signs to.
I think it's not just your responsibility, it's all of our responsibility to try to make an effort not to throw something on the ground or put it somewhere where it's gonna blow about. I know you had that picture from my neighborhood, but I pick up trash. I know there are other people in my neighborhood who pick up trash, and it's just a part of having that many things close together, having those open dumpsters there. Like you said, the wind blows things, you pick it up one day, and half an hour later it's back out there. So it's an awareness on our part. It's an effort by your group. There's not an easy solution to that one.
Let me ask you one more thing just while we're talking about that. Do you have any kind of tarping regulations for commercial people that come to the landfill, like they do at the 45 landfill? Or
Any type of what?
Like, do you have to, commercial people have to tarp their trailers and things like that, or do they have open debris trailers?
Open debris, I think, is the majority of them. The majority of them are open debris.
I'm just trying to combat this sometime in my life. I don't know. I think it's pickup trucks. I think it's.
Yeah.
That's a part of it.
I'm telling you, I don't think it's as many Starkville people as it is. And you come here after a SEC or any ball game weekend, it's out of towners. I mean, I really think it is.
We
It's
have
worse on-
received
it's
a
worse on
lot
ball
from our
game weekends.
visitors. We have had to do some great cleanup after our visitors left, but
People from Starkville would never throw trash.
that's right.
Nor in my neighborhood would they. Thank you, Mayor, for not throwing any trash out.
Any further questions or comments from Ms. King? Any further questions or comments?
Y'all are a very hard-working department, and we appreciate your efforts. Y'all, frequently when people talk about the city of Starkville, y'all are the people they're talking about. So we do appreciate your efforts.
Thank you, Ms. Candy.
Thank you, Ms. Andy.
And that exhausts the open session portion of our agenda. A motion to go into a closed session to determine whether there is a need for an executive session is in order.
So moved.
Motion has been made by Alderman Corey to go into a closed session to determine whether there is a need for an executive session. Do I hear a second? Motion's been seconded by Alderman Parker. Alderman Corey, do you wish to speak on the measure? Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure passes. While everybody's clearing the room without objection, I'm going to take us into a brief recess. Any objection? Any objection? We'll stand in recess.
Thanks very much.
I sent that text before you reported.